numerous times, but we'll kind of lead up to how we get to the Worthington farm and what was happening here. So it is 1864, and yet again, we're going to have both Union and Confederate armies here in Maryland and in this area, the people who lived here, who have seen these armies come through every year of the war. Not only every year of the war have these armies come through, but in between, there's always a military presence here protecting the junction area. For about 9 months out of the war, the 14th New Jersey was here protecting that area, and they became pretty good friends with part of the people who were here. We will hear about that during the program. I have some quotes, particularly from Breedenburg, where he talks about seeing the family. So it's no big surprise to them, really, or anybody in this area, when the armies are coming again. And basically what is happening is that Lee has sent Early into the valley to get Hunter completely out. Hunter's been there just wreaking havoc in the valley, and that is the breadbasket, the communications, the transportation center for the Confederates. They need Lynchburg. They need these areas. It's very important. So Early is sent to finally oust Hunter out of there, which he is successful in doing. And the discussion between Early and Lee before he goes on this campaign had been, get Hunter out of the valley. If you feel like it would be successful, or that you can get close to Washington, continue to go down the valley and into Maryland. If not, return to Virginia. So really it's going to be on Early to make that decision once he clears Hunter out of the valley. So once that goal was accomplished, he did feel like he had a pretty open road to get to Washington. He doesn't think that there's going to be a lot of Union presence there to block his way, that he can't just push right through. So he is going to continue to go down the valley. Hunter is driven completely out. So here's where miscommunication starts. And for those of you who were at the panel last night, you heard a little bit about sort of the miscommunication and delay in actions and things, that misinformation that takes place to culminate in what will become this battle. Part of that is Hunter getting out of the valley and then not coming back, which Union command believed that Hunter would be coming back and taking care of whatever these remnant Confederates that people were complaining about. But that was not going to happen. And it's actually the president of the railroad who is the one that talks to Lew Wallace and lets him know that there is a problem. The railroad, his agents in the field are telling him telegraph lines are being torn up, the railroads, being torn up. There's this large contingent of Confederates coming. And so Wallace is hearing this. He is not getting information from high command. They think that Hunter's coming back to take care of it. They have intelligence that tells them that Early has returned to Virginia, which obviously is not the case. So they're not terribly concerned about it. Lew Wallace is going to bring whatever men he can get together, including the 100-day men. There's some Maryland units. 8th Illinois shows up, 8th Illinois Cavalry, and they're going to come here to the junction area to sort of assess the situation, see what's happening. They believe at that point that it is a large Confederate force under Early, who's been making his way through, who's gone past Harper's Ferry. Finally, it kind of starts sinking into Union command that there is a threat, and so they send forces, the 3rd Division of the 6th Corps, and they're going to put them on ships up the Chesapeake to Locust Point and to trains that will come here. And they're not going to start arriving until the morning before this battle. And even at that, their orders are to go to Harper's Ferry, which of course Early's already passed there. And so they're going to get off the train here, and Wallace is going to set up his defense. And basically, wasn't sure at the beginning if Early's intention is to go directly to Baltimore first or go to Washington. By the time this battle's going to start, he believes that his aim is to get to Washington as quickly as he can. And so he's going to set up most of those veteran troops that have arrived, 3rd Division of the 6th Corps under Ricketts, and he's going to concentrate them at the junction area and then throw a skirmish line here between Thomas and Worthington. And then there's going to be a mix of some of Wallace's 100-day men at the junction, and then further north about 3 miles of here to the Jug Bridge, because he wants to protect his retreat route, because he knows he's not going to win this battle. He's here to delay Early as long as he possibly can. And he is getting word to Grant, you need to get more reinforcements into Washington. Confederates are marching to Washington. We're going to try to keep them here as long as we can. You have to get reinforcements. So that's what's in play here. Wallace trying to just hold the Union here as long as he can. He's got between 6,000 and 7,000 troops. Part of them have never been in battle before. Early has with him somewhere probably between 12,000 and 13,000 once he gets to Frederick. They will skirmish for about 2 days on the western side of the city as Early and his men are making their way over Catoctin Mountain and coming into Frederick. So there will be some skirmishing, but by the night of July 8th, the Union have pulled back to set up their defense on this side of the river, and then on the morning of July 9th, the Confederates will be making their way up the Georgetown Pike. And while all that's happening, you've got McCausland and his cavalry detached, and they're headed towards Hagerstown, and they're going to ransom Hagerstown for money and supplies. Several of the banks get together there, and civilians put up the money, and then they're going to make their way to Middletown, and they ransom Middletown for $5,000. I think they might get about $1,500 out of them, but they don't wait around. It's a very small town, and by that time, Early and his forces are up here, and they're joining together, and they're going to be doing that skirmishing for like I said, on the 7th and 8th before this battle. So there's this element of the ransoming that's going on. Once they get to Frederick, they're going to ransom it for $200,000 and supplies. And while all of that's happening, you also have, Frederick is a hospital center during the Civil War. And so they are trying to get, and it's holding a lot of supplies. So the people in Frederick are getting the convalescents out of the hospitals. They don't want those prisoners to be captured. And they're also getting supplies out. They don't get all the supplies out because Early does get his list of supply demands that he has asked for. And they'll be going back and forth. There's a series of letters that goes back and forth with the mayor and city officials and Early, sort of debating and asking questions about ultimately what's going to become of them getting the ransom at the end of the day. They kind of dicker back and forth a little bit, but ultimately there's going to be 5 banks that come together, and they put up the money for the ransom, and then the city pays the banks back, and then the city is going to get their money back through taxes and bonds and all these things, and then I think in 1951 that ransom is going to be paid off.
In the basement, in the cellar, in those little wooden window right there behind those wooden panels, there's a little boy looking out that window. He's only 7 years old. 7 years old. And his name's Glenn Worthington. He sees the battle unfold in front of him.
And they need to find a ford. which is a place in the river that's shallow, where it's much easier for them to cross. Now, where in the river was that ford? Well, the fords move as the soil shifts, as the riverbed shifts, and so that ford might now be in the Potomac, you know. So, but what we do know is that it was near Ballinger Creek, okay? So Ballinger Creek comes in right up here a little piece. It's hard to see because of all the foliage, but Ballinger Creek comes in right there, and so that is the approximate location of where they forded. So now the program begins. Are you ready? All right. So we talked about McCausland and his cavalry. They are given the order the day before to find a ford in the river. And we know that one company of the 8th Illinois Cavalry are down here doing reconnaissance. So as they are doing that, now McCausland's men are coming. Now, there's about 1,300 cavalry. They are going to be under the 14th, 16th, 17th, and 22nd Virginia cavalries. And so it's going to take them a little while. They're not all going to come at one time, right? So they're going to be, you know, kind of coming in a column across. And so the 8th Illinois is going to encounter this sort of first wave of the cavalry as they come across. So they're going to have that encounter with the 8th Illinois. And in a letter from July 17th, 1864, Ordnance Sergeant James Zachary McChesney says he is at the 14th Virginia Cavalry. He said, "I saw a few Yankee cavalry across the river, and General McCausland told us that he wanted us to cross as soon as possible. We plunged into the river, not knowing how deep it was." Good thing somebody knew how to find a ford. Some 6 or 7 of us immediately charged 25 Yankee cavalry, and just as I had overtaken one and called him to surrender, I cast my eyes to the right and discovered that I was in the rear of the Yankee line by some 75 yards. Oops, not where you want to be. So this initial charge and skirmish is pretty quick, but McCausland's not expecting it. You know, they're not expecting it as they come across. Lieutenant Colonel Tavener, who was newly promoted as commander of the 17th Virginia, he was shot out of his saddle at close range while leading the charge. He died where he fell. He was 22. McCausland then appointed Captain Frederick Smith of Company G to assume immediate command of the 17th. And then he unfortunately is going to be shot dead in a skirmish in Urbana, because these guys meet up here as soon as McCausland's men cross the river. We saw that tree line down there. There wouldn't have been a whole lot of trees here. This would have been very open. Wouldn't have had all these trees here. They would have been able to see the house at this point, the sort of open field. They're still on horseback at this point. They are going to go up towards the house, and that's where they're going to dismount. Now, typically what would happen is you would have 4 men dismount, and the 5th one would hold the horses. Every 4 or 5th man. 4. And you would have that person would hold the horses. In this particular movement, that command was not given. And we've always sort of wondered why that is, because they seemingly didn't know what they were facing, and they thought it was going to be an easy march. So why wouldn't they have somebody just hold the horses instead of telling everybody, tie up your horses, let them loose, get in form, go? You know, why the sense of urgency there when there hadn't really been a sense of urgency before. So, you know, we've talked about, the Rangers have sort of talked about it, and, you know, one of the ideas is that even though McCausland's, you know, it's his men or whatever, that the officer, you know, the one who's just been killed, one's just been put in charge, that perhaps he just was a little green in giving that sort of command. Or perhaps they just thought that this was going to be so easy that it was fine. Just leave the horses. We'll come back for them, once we've secured everything. So we don't know exactly what the answer is to that, because we do know that they did not know they were facing these veteran troops that they will end up facing. So they're going to come up here. They're going to dismount, and this is we're going to talk about the first attack here a little bit, and then I'm actually going to talk about McCausland right here, and then as we talk about Gordon, we'll move up, sort of in that transition between McCausland and Gordon's troops. So when McCausland's men are up here, they're going to be headed across. Like I said, they're trying to get towards the junction area, but of course to get over there, they've got to go through that front field, basically where we were, and get across that fence line on the Thomas farm. So what they don't realize, what they can't see, are these Union troops that are on the other side of that fence row. These are veteran troops they're not expecting. This is the 3rd Division of the 6th Corps. And who can see them? John Worthington, who's on the 2nd floor of his house. He can see them, and then he sees these Confederate troops, he says, marching onto that skirmish line as if on parade. Can't understand it. Why are they just marching straight into them? So here's a description of McCausland's attack, actually I believe taken from Dr. Cooling's book on the battle. He says, through the cornfield with banners and guidons waving and a general feeling of easy victory prevailing, onward through the cornfield drawing nearer and nearer to the enemy, neither side firing a shot until the Confederate line reached a small elevation in the ground within 125 yards of the division fence. Worthington said after this action, the men would drag their muskets by the muzzle, the shirt collars open, faces depicting the greatest terror. And why? Because Ricketts is going to wait, as he said, until the Confederates are about 125 yards, till he's going to order his men to stand up and fire that first volley. And I know Wallace says, as he's watching this happen, he trusts Ricketts. He knows that Ricketts knows what he's doing, but he's getting a little stressed because he's going, okay, when are they going to get up? Like, they're getting really close. When are these guys going to get up? But then he writes, then at a word of command, the whole Federal line rose to its feet, resting their guns on the upper rails of the fence. And they took aim and fired a murderous volley into the ranks of the approaching foe. Confederates recoiled and, pursued by Federals, retreated beyond the Worthington house. The officers tried in vain to rally the men. They swore at them and threatened them with sword and pistol, but for a while they would give them no heed. The latter halted and formed into ranks again. You've got Evans, who's going to again go over the toe of Brooks Hill, over to Thomas. Here's Evans. And then York's going to go up the middle. So you've got York coming up the middle here. And then you've got Terry, who's going to kind of sweep the river part and get this line. Now they're going to go in 3 different movements. It's going to be Evans and then York and Terry, and they're going to push this line back, and then Terry is going to sweep it. All of this action is going to happen within about a 2-hour period, and it's going to be very hard fighting and not a very big space and not a very long time. And so when they're coming through, there is a quote from Private Nathaniel Harris of the 16th Virginia Cavalry, and he's talking about what Evans is saying as he's rallying his men. He says, "Come on, Georgians, follow me, and we'll show these cavalrymen how to fight. They're only 100-day men, and they can't stand up against our troops." So he's kind of getting down on the McCausland's men. He's like, let's show these guys how to fight. They're only 100-day men. So clearly they are still unaware as they go into battle what it is they're facing. Lieutenant John Lewis of the 10th Vermont, on the other side, he's saying their 3 formidable lines came boldly up with flaunting banners and bristling steel as if by one grand demonstration to sweep us from the field. So you get a sense of what they think is going to happen over there. They think it's going to be easy again. Another man says, it was said that it was raw troops we were facing, but I never saw old soldiers fight better. Private Alfred Rowe of the 9th New York Heavy Artillery, who would go on to write a lot about this battle, he says the day had ended disastrously so far as we were concerned, but for the 9 hours a handful of men held early thousands. So some of them realized, what they had really done. Troops have been routed. They have been pushed back by Terry's brigade, then York's brigade, by Evans' brigade, York's brigade, and then Terry's brigade kind of sweeps the rest of them. Wallace calls for retreat. Some of these guys were already in retreat. It's a really good win. I mean, Gordon likes to, in his reminiscence, he won and was the best at everything, and his men. But in this battle, he talks about the Confederate victory was won at a fearful cost, and practically by a single division, his division, but was complete, and all the way was open to Washington for General Early's march. But it must be remembered that McCausland's brigade bore the brunt of this battle, having been engaged for about 2 hours before I crossed the Monocacy. So in his reminiscence, although he's that one division that wins this battle, he does give credit to McCausland because he is going to be the first one who's going to engage with the Union troops over here and take kind of the brunt of that force until they are going to leave, and then Gordon's men enter the fray.
Ohio, and they were also 100-day men. They had not seen much fighting. 100-day men are men who are only enlisted for 100 days. That's all these men were. And these portions of 3 regiments actually held that bridge for 8 hours, because if that route is compromised and taken by the Confederates, Lew Wallace has no escape route back towards Baltimore. The Best family loses one of their barns here at the property. It's right over here where the 15-mile marker sign is today. In that general location, there was a barn there. Sharpshooters, Confederate sharpshooters came in and took possession of that barn and started shooting on the Union skirmish line. Eventually, The two North Carolina brigades, Johnson's on the other side of the turnpike, and Lewis's over here, are going to force the skirmishers to fall back through the Best Farm right where we're standing at. Through the woods of the railroad tracks here, take position for a while in the woods, in the railroad track, using it as a defense, and then eventually creating a right angle at the junction down to the covered bridge. From there, they're in a right angle, and they're going to hold that line. In the second attack that the Confederates make, the 106 will actually end up falling back, forging through the river. The 9th New York, some of them will get across the bridge before it's burnt. And a lot of them will have to jump into the river to get across because Lew Wallace orders the burning of the bridge to keep Stephen Ramsey from getting the bridge. Because if he gets that bridge and he gets across, there goes the center of Lew Wallace's line, and then there goes Ricketts' whole command.
The Union come here with 6 pieces of artillery, Alexander's Baltimore Battery, and they do move them around the field. Mentioned when the covered wooden bridge was burned, they then moved artillery closer to Thomas. You'll hear some repeating fire from artillery at Thomas today if you attend the artillery demonstrations at the visitor center. You can also go where the artillery is at Thomas. It's another hike. Want to do that. But the Union or the Confederates have with them upwards of 30 pieces of artillery at their disposal. They are not going to use all of them. They'll have 20 few engaged. We believe that 2 or 3 pieces came over here. We don't know for certain. We do know for certain that where that artillery piece is right there, that there was a gun just like that positioned there during the battle. Very close to the basement. And if you turn around, you see that boarded up window, and that mimics what Glenn Worthington and his family was watching through. So all of this action of Confederates on the move, being pushed back by Union, all of that would have been seen by the family. And then after the battle, you've got dead and wounded everywhere. Gordon's attack, he loses about 1/3 of his men. So most of the Confederate dead are actually during Gordon's attack. And that's going to be a lot of them in this area. So all of these houses, all of these farms become field hospitals, after the battle. Union and Confederate alike are being treated until they're going to be taken into the hospital center of Frederick. Some of these men are going to lay here for several days. As hot as it is today, that's how hot it was then. It was in the mid-90s. It's very hot. So imagine you're wounded and you're just laying in the sun. Hopefully somebody has drug you to a shaded spot. But we know that the family here and all of the families will help. They'll do what they can. Worthington had his sons, Clark and Glenn, go gather up sheaves of wheat to try to make pillows and sort of comfort the soldiers as they could. Corporal Roderick Clark of the 14th New Jersey describes it. He says, all through the night, doctors of both sides and their assistants called on me frequently. The rebel doctor gave me a drink of liquor, but the Union doctor had only a little for his regiment. The same rebel doctor with 2 stretcher bearers came after me and put me in the ambulance with 2 wounded rebels and started us for Frederick. So this is sort of one of those more rare battles that you hear about where the Confederates actually have more supplies, more artillery, more people at their disposal than the Union does, because this was a scramble of Wallace trying to get forces together to make the defense here. And when Wallace calls for that retreat, he does so knowing that he did what he came here to do. although it is strategically a win for the Confederates, he's held them here long enough that they have around 900 dead, wounded, and missing soldiers. The Union will have about 1,300 dead and wounded, missing soldiers. The Union count, though, we believe is more captured than dead and wounded. For the Confederates, their higher number is dead, because they came in to these attacks in these fields thinking that they're facing troops that have never been in battle before. And you're going to go into battle a little differently than they figure out that they're facing these veteran troops. And it is a deadly fight for the Confederates who are here. Captain Chauncey Harris of the 14th New Jersey, his story is, I think, kind of interesting. He's severely wounded in the shoulder and in the knee. He's taken to Edward Baker's farm. So that's the farm that you saw as we came up the Worthington Lane, just on the other side of Brooks Hill here. Now, I can't imagine he was said, oh, can I go to the Baker farm? And they just lovingly, stopped everything to take him there. He must have actually fallen there. But we believe he probably had some sort of relationship with Clementine America Baker, and I have to say her full name because I love her name, Clementine America Baker. He was referred to as Glenn Worthington when he grows up and writes the book about the battle as the 21-year-old spinster daughter of Edward Baker. 21. But we believe that there had been some sort of relationship between her and Chauncey Harris, probably in the time that he was here with the 14th New Jersey. But he did convalesce there for a while before he's sent to the hospital in Frederick. Before war ends, they actually will get married. And then they, after the war, go back to New Jersey.
Thank you for watching our video. Please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, please leave those in the comment section. We'll work on getting them out to you as soon as possible.